Welcome, everyone. I'm Justin Dumas, and I'm the sales leader here at Cest Intelligence. I'm likely your first point of contact here, so I trust this webinar marks the start of a productive partnership with many of you. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be showcasing the ARISE framework, which is a unified governance model designed to bring clarity to the noise of AI risk, data privacy, and shifting security compliance. This isn't another checklist. It's basically a system for defensible trust. If you haven't accessed it yet, please go to ariseframework.com. It's a free and publicly available. Feel free to bookmark that site and get into it as much as possible. So, who is Cest Intelligence? We are a specialty advisory firm built on conviction that high-stakes environments, trust, credibility, and discipline aren't just supporting attributes. They are the product we provide. Our mission is to ensure secure, ethical, and equitable adoption of technology. So presenting with me today are Paul Crafer, our VP of Services, and Chris Leung, our Virtual Chief Responsible AI Officer. They're perfectly positioned to walk you through what we do, how we do it, and more importantly, how it'll benefit you. We're also joined by two of our expert guests for additional perspective. Deb Webster, author of Better Than Your Behavior and founder of Amani Labs, which is a capital lab for trusted AI. And then we have Devorah Grazer, founder and CEO of Rocket Smart, which is supporting AI-powered innovation commercialization, and whose TEDx talk, The Shrinking Window of AI Opportunity, has over 72,000 views. So stick around at the end. We're also going to share how you can sign up for a technical briefing with our team. So before we dive into the framework itself, I think it's worth taking a moment to talk about where ARISE actually came from, because it didn't start as a product or a service offering. It started as a response to a real problem. Paul and Chris, you two were really in the trenches when this thing took shape. So can you take us back to the beginning, sort of what was the catalyst, what the team was seeing in the market that made them say, we need to build something different?
Yeah, sure. Of course, Justin, happy to do so. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. So how do I start? Okay, so all of these frameworks, right, they often come out of like a research study, an academic vacuum, some kind of way of people putting together, okay, should we do something different? But ARISE was really kind of came out of actual work that was being done by our CEO, Josh Capino, over at the Department of Defense. He was also passing through some pretty high-stakes critical sectors at the time with private companies. And if he connected the dots between what he was seeing at the DoD, which Department of Defense, and some of these big companies he was working through as kind of a CISO or an IT manager, he was seeing that technology failure was having these real-world serious consequences. So what was missing and what was needed with this kind of like this watertight governance approach, right, to managing risk, to building trust, to sewing all of the disparate kind of areas together.
Absolutely, Paul. We saw organizations drowning in a myriad of regulations and standards. Typically, in a large enterprise, security team follows NIST. Privacy team focuses on GDPR, for example, and the compliance team tracks regulations in today's world, such as the EU AI Act. These are silos in operation. This fragmentation results in operational risk, where each silo assumes the other is responsible, but elements fall through the cracks. Additionally, traditional approaches to governance have evolved around checklists, executed periodically, which is no longer sufficient when adopting and deploying AI. You've probably heard about optics. Organizations love to use that term, and some might call it theater. Those are not proof of execution for outcomes that materially impact employees, clients, consumers, organizations, and society at large.
Thanks, Chris. I know you've posted on compliance and governance theatre before on LinkedIn, so I know that's a topic that's kind of close to your area of expertise. I mean, one of the biggest risks, I guess if you look right now and you talk to GRC professionals, right, one of the biggest risks that they're seeing is this diffusion of responsibility. So on a inter-organizational layer within companies, organizations need interdisciplinary teams within their business. And that's why you've got GRC. You'll have G professionals in your business, you'll have R professionals in your business, and you'll have C professionals in your business, right? And sometimes those people will never even meet. They won't even know what each other are doing. If you're lucky enough to have a unified GRC function, brilliant. But in many organizations, people are looking at, say, the DPO to take on AI governance, right? And the DPO shouldn't be doing AI governance. The DPO shouldn't be influenced in any kind of the decisions they're making according to GDPR. So organizations need interdisciplinary teams. And the challenge is then operationalizing that interdisciplinary ownership. If you take that up a level of abstraction, if you go from inside the company to within the market, if you're thinking about how companies interact with each other within a market, this lack of shared responsibility shows up as companies saying, we're not high risk. No, we're just deployers. We're not providers. We'll be fine. Don't worry about us. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about Facebook. They're the ones you need to worry about. I heard that response, at a conference I was in 3-4 months ago from what I would consider to be a high-risk organization, a high-risk provider. So this responsibility is being spread across roles and across market actors, but this accountability is not, right? So this diffusion of responsibility creates these gaps in AI governance. It creates gaps in AI governance in companies, and it creates gaps in AI governance in markets. And that's where vulnerabilities in the entire AI value chain creep in. So, shared responsibility is a very complex topic. You won't find it explicitly covered in ISO. You won't find it explicitly covered in NIST. It might come down the pipe one day, but it certainly hasn't already. So something needed to kind of connect all of these different teams together, and that's where ARISE fits in. It harmonizes these language of global standards. It puts it in a single model. It enables organizations to kind of take on these responsibilities responsibly without necessarily slowing down their innovation. So that's kind of where it came from. That's what it was designed to fix. JD, over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So, Paul, Chris, thank you for giving us the background on ARISE, on assessed intelligence, excuse me. So now we've heard how assessed intelligence came to be. I'd like to bring in some of our guests to talk about some of the challenges that they're seeing out here. So Deb Webster, founder of Amani Labs, focused on trusted AI, and Devora Grazer, founder of Rocket Smart, focused on AI-powered commercialization. Deb, thanks for joining us today. You've said in the past that AI is basically a responsibility, not a tool. So why do fragmented accountability within organizations, splintered standards, government frameworks create such serious risks for investors and capital?
Great to be here. Thanks for really happy to be part of this. And great question. So it's funny. So a lot of people are really obsessed about the technology, but I love to look at the human factor in technology. So putting technology aside, putting AI aside, there's a lot of silo thinking in organizations. There's infighting, there's politicking. When you add AI into the mix, which is such a powerful technology, everything just gets amplified. The good, the bad, and the ugly. From an investor and founder perspective, I love one of the things that Chris mentioned about there being a myriad of regulations. I would actually describe it more of a quagmire, and trying to navigate that space and trying to figure out, which regulation to follow, which not. Some have the attitude of move fast and break things, so they will deploy capital, build things until regulation catches up. I think this is absolutely irresponsible, abhorrent behavior. It's akin to deploying a car with a super fast car with no seatbelt, no brakes, and no material that actually crumples on impact. We know better. We know the impact of this technology. This technology doesn't hit just a very small part of the population. It magnifies the harms, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the practices organizations are already involved with.
Yeah, that's a great feedback. It is a very messy thing, and obviously there's a very wide swath of where people are in their maturity models. So, Devora, thanks. Hi, also thank you for being with us. From a board perspective, as generative AI is being embedded by default into enterprise products like Microsoft Office, Salesforce, all of these types of platforms, I'm seeing that there's not a lot of governance and accountability necessarily being added to that mix. What should boards be asking management to do now to identify these problems sort of as they're coming up?
Well, thanks for inviting me, Justin. And that's a great question because it brings up an important point. Many boards and companies may have thought that they had time to consider buying new AI native software. But what we've all seen is that these large companies are kind of stuffing the AI into their software products. And it's sometimes harder to opt out than you would expect. In other words, these products aren't being provided with AI as an opt-in. They suddenly appear and the managers and the companies have to decide what to do. So what boards and their companies should do first is develop a process. And within that process, they should look to see how to identify where AI is being used in their company, maybe in software platforms that didn't have it before, but maybe also new purchases. Not just talking about generative AI, any kind of AI. Once they develop the process to find where the AI is or where it will be in the near future, then they can consider how to govern and how to mitigate the risks. But you can't identify the risks without knowing where the AI is. And I have to say, quick plug for Arise, love the framework. One of the things it gives is a great way for boards and companies to talk about these things with a shared communication framework.
That is definitely what Arise was meant to do, and we appreciate seeing that insight there. So we're obviously seeing a bit of a clear pattern. New vendors, they do their diligence, but in the existing tools and software, there's risks that are creeping in that require pretty much a lot more review. I'd say human review here. So AI risk is real. It's landing on the boards, investors, leadership teams who aren't necessarily equipped to answer these questions. That's exactly, to that point, what Arise was designed to solve. So with that being said, we'll come back to you in a few minutes to kind of wrap things up, if you will. But I want to turn things back over to Chris and Paul to talk a little bit about the Arise framework itself and kind of the components and what it's really meant to do here. Chris and Paul, thank you very much.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, JD. You know what? I know we were a bit nervous about doing this, but let's give it a whirl. I'm going to live demo Arise as we speak. It's so much more fun than just looking at a deck. So, do I have screen share? I think I do.
I believe you do.
So you should be seeing the Arise framework.
I do see
thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up if you're seeing that. Okay, excellent. So what I think we'll start is we'll go through the 7 pillars. All right, I'll just quickly whiz through them, just so you can get a rough idea as to what each one does, represents purpose, right? I mean, the purpose is pretty straightforward, right? The purpose is right there in the definition. But what that definition doesn't give you is a kind of why does this matter? Why should I be concerned about this? So I'm just going to, as we'll go through these 7 pillars, I'll highlight each one. I'm not going to read the purpose, the kind of definition underneath it. You can do that as I speak. But I will tell you why it matters and what are the outcomes from each pillar. So let's quickly do this. So under govern, define and direct, right? I mean, why? Because we need to break down silos and we need to get that cross-functional stakeholder buy-in. We've talked about it already. Every leader needs to be on the same page, right? That's a brief kind of why does govern matter. What it gives you, the outcomes, you get that organizational accountability. You get responsibility structures. They're established for governance, they're established for risk management and for compliance. Now, if I click over to manage, okay, so you've got the high level, we're coming down just a slight level, a little bit more action in manage than there was in govern. The why behind manage, because it's everyone's problem. And there is responsibility that you have to address and you have to solve. There are duties, there are tasks, there are processes, there are workflows, there are protocols, there are controls that people need to be put in place. Ryan Carroll over at For Humanity would say, the right people doing the right work at the right time in the right roles, right? And that's where managed comes in. And what's the outcome? It's capabilities optimized for execution through organizational change and transformation. Now, if I click over to identify, feel free to just quickly read that definition as I speak. But why do we need to assess and understand? Because there is a critical need to understand and be aware of risk. Right across the organization's estate, right? Not just in the specific AI system that you're bringing in. I know we've talked quite a bit about vendors, pumping out toggles and making you switch on AI, but right across the whole estate and across digital supply chains, there needs to be that effective planning of controls, treatments, and mitigations. And what does that give you? It gives you a mapping of risks and vulnerabilities, right? You need to find the problems to put the fires out. So impacts need to be assessed, exposures need to be understood, and we need to have good mitigation planning. Protect. Why is protect important? Because without sufficient and robust operationalized controls, treatments, and mitigations, AI risks, cyber-related risks are more likely to hit your business. They're more likely to turn from risk into incidents, into breaches, right? And what does that give you? What does working through Protect give you? Simply, it operationalizes your controls. Okay, let's hit into Detect. So why is Detect important, right? We need to be thinking about, okay, within Detect, we want to be picking up on, we need to be finding those moments where we can pick up on exactly what's going on. We need to think about, okay, so what did go wrong? How are we meant to be able to deal with it? We're going to be digging into Detect actually a little later and looking into the actual pillar and some of the controls. So I won't say too much right now, but Detect is super important. It is the bridge between protecting and responding. And what is responding and why does that matter? Because effective response contains those breaches. And we talk often about adverse impact response systems and how important they are to put into place. Having those types of systems in place, having the controls in place that allow you to respond effectively, well, for a start, it gets the regulator off your back, right? A whole bunch of documentation and technical documentation and official filings, but at the same time, it allows you to get your business and your operations back up and recovering. And what's the outcome? Simple, resilience. I'm not going to define resilience. Look it up. Resilience is exactly where you want to be because you're not going to pick up on all of the threats and risks. So you need to be able to handle that long pass when it comes. And lastly, validate. Now, validate is, and I'm going to say it now, I'm going to say it later. Validate is for a rise where the rubber hits the road on controls and operationalization of controls. All right, so let's think about it this way. The world is changing, right, from a geopolitical perspective, but even through governance landscapes, right? Internal controls, treatments, and mitigations need to now be proven. It's not enough to put your badge on your trust.mydomain.com and say, it's all right, you can trust us, we've got the badge, you've got to prove it. And if something goes wrong, you've got to be able to show it. So that independent verification for trustworthiness is what you get out of Validate. Okay, I'm going to dive into one of the actual pillars now. And I think, if you dozed off there for a second, no offense. I try and change up the tone of my voice sometimes just so people don't fall asleep. But we're looking at the pillars of the ARISE framework, right? So let's take a look at what's inside three of them and how we use them. And I'm going to start with identify. What I want to do is I want to kind of just scroll down here and show you what we got under identify. And the reason I'm showing you this is you can't protect what you haven't mapped. I mentioned it a minute ago, right? You need to find those gaps. You need to find those problems. And to illustrate how you do this, I'm going to navigate into IAM asset management, which includes two critical controls. Well, all right, it includes three critical controls. I'm not going to say BYOD asset management isn't critical. It is. But, BYOD, everybody's been talking about since people started bringing iPhones to work. So let's focus in on AI system inventory and system asset management. Why these two? These two controls work at different levels, but they work together to provide that strategy and oversight layer. So you need to be moving from, okay, do we know what we've got in our business? In fact, I think I've got a post coming out on LinkedIn now or tomorrow that says, do you know if you're running an AEDT, right? Do you know if you're running an automated employment decision tool for your recruitment? Because I'm sure there are a few companies out there that are running them that don't know, right? Recruitment suddenly looks great, but you're running a tool that you didn't even know anything about. So you need to move from the kind of the, do I know what we're running, to that operationalized model in that you know all of your AI system estate, you know, all of the inventories. And I want to just scroll down here into some of the framework mappings, right? So you can see that there's a heavy alignment with the NIST AI risk management framework. You can also see that it ties in very closely to the NIST CSF, that's cybersecurity framework, and also into ISO 42001. You can even go further and start looking at some of the criteria mappings. So you've got these framework mappings. What do we need to meet? Criteria mappings, binary audit criteria. Yes, no, not can we do this, but have we done this? On every control, you've got this. So, you know, we've talked about it before. Deb and Devor just mentioned it. Most companies are plagued by this kind of shadow AI perspective, right? And it's not just about employees using unauthorized chatbots. It also happens when these vetted third-party vendors silently roll out these toggle features into the software. And these two controls are meant to identify those features. They're meant to be enabling you to prevent that vector for security vulnerabilities, for unattended data leakage. You know, the amount of people that are putting proprietary documentation still into frontier models, the loss of that intellectual property, right? That's what these two controls, amongst other things, are designed to do. So let's zoom back out and go into detect. I said I'd give it a moment. So I want to go into continuous monitoring. So we're in detect, and I'm going to do continuous monitoring. Now, let's say you've got the CRO, the Chief Risk Officer's hat on, or let's say you've got the CISO's hat on, right? You can wear two hats if you want, maybe just one. So even with these strong defenses that we've been talking about, you've got to assume that some of these threats are going to get through. And that's where detect comes in. And you want to stay ahead of these threats. You've got to be flexing your continuous monitoring muscle. You need to be doing your intelligent threat analysis, right? And this is getting even more vital as organizations look to explore agentic workflows and the unknown risks associated with multi-agentic systems. And they are unknown. Do you know what different agents will do when they come into contact with each other if they're being created by different providers? There is very little research on that topic. So even in, you know, the fancy world of multi-agentic systems, you need to be understanding that there are going to be risks and there are going to be threats that you don't even think about. So many of the focus areas in the detect pillar, you know, they're critical for these types of challenges. Due to time, I want to spend some time on continuous monitoring, and this is where we kind of zoom in to look at how governance and security kind of fit together, right? Now, I'm going to zoom down to the EU AI Act. Now, Annex 4 has that reference to technical documentation for your monitoring system. And if we were being 100% accurate, we'd also have Article 72 here as well, which I'm sure we will pretty soon. But the point being is that, you know that post-market monitoring is something that is not sufficiently covered by ISO 42001. Doesn't go far enough. So you need to find a way to build in post-market monitoring. That's the EU AI Act term. And this is one way to do it, by using this control. You can also zoom up into 42001. Sure, you've got clause, what's that? That'll be Annex A 8.3, external reporting. And you've also got clause 9.1, which is monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. So I've given you two examples, right? You can also look at the other framework mappings. You can use the criteria mappings. There's a whole bunch in here that's going to take you to that point where you can feel confident that you've got this continuous monitoring in place. And in a traditional monitoring environment, if we think about traditional IT environments, right, for the CISOs in the audience, think about the time when AI didn't really, affect your business. Your monitoring was all about keeping your business up and running, wasn't it? Keeping your IT system up. And in an AI-driven world, in an AI-driven system, monitoring is not about uptime anymore, it's about conformity. In the EU, if you're running an AI system, it is a product safety law. If you've presumed conformity and placed an official filing on that basis, and you do not conform, then you can be held liable, not just by the regulator, but by your competitors as well. So this control isn't just watching for what used to be a server crash, it's now watching for what could be considered performance drift, fairness, bias, all those types of things. Right? It's the nervous system. Okay, I'm not going to go much further than that. I think I want to let Chris in. And Chris, did you want to dip into validate?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So if you remember, there were 7 pillars, right? So any organizations adopting the ARISE framework, right, you would go through the implementation. So assuming you've got some, maybe not all of them there, you start implementing, or you've got some of it, and then you use the framework to plug your gaps, right? So you've got implements, and then you operate your controls and all your guardrails, safeguards. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to prove, and then Paul mentioned the word proof, right? So proof is so important. So this is where we move from claims to verifiable proof. So your stakeholders, your customers, your consumers, regulators, they want to understand that all your controls actually work, and you need to be able to prove that. So what we're going to do is look at 2 controls. One is internal audit, which is you've got it there, Paul. Yep. And the other one we're going to look at is external audit. So let's cover the internal audit first. You see the requirements on the screen there, and those of you who work in the third line of defense within organizations will know exactly what internal audit does. I'm not going to go through that, but here we've got some requirements specific to AI. So here we're calling for independent assessment of AI governance, risk, and controls effectiveness. It talks about testing, evaluation, verification, and validation evidence, fairness, robustness, outcomes, and data governance. It also see that it maps to the 2 NIST frameworks. In fact, 3 NIST frameworks, and then also the ISO 42001 and 27001. Now, clearly, internal audits will give you the internal perspective of assurance. But then what we do is we add a 4th line of defense, which is the external audit. So can we switch to that, please?
Sure.
So external audit really is, we adopt the For Humanity independent audit schemes, because that's been crowdsourced through global contributors. So that gives you the diverse inputs and multi-stakeholder feedback, as much as possible, real-world perspectives when these criteria have been curated and defined. And so what external audit does is, like I said before, gives you the external perspective, but also you see the mappings as well to NIST and ISO frameworks there. So can we just quickly take a look at the criteria? Yeah. So you can see that For Humanity, specific to cybersecurity, one of the schemes does give you a criteria on how the audit, how to audit these systems. We also have criteria linked to SOC 2 and CMMC as well for those organizations that need to comply to those standards. So what does that mean now with, I talked about 3rd line defense, 4th line defense. So what's organizations will get when they adopt both 3rd line and 4th line of defense to validate their capability is that they will be able to move away from just saying that, the systems are safe or whatever, and typically going from saying it to actually proving it. And what ARISE will give organizations is that capability that's dynamic, adaptive, and also allows organizations to operationalize a continuous model for governance, risk management, compliance, and assurance. And organizations that decide to invest in these best practices that's outlined in the validate pillar can easily turn the cost of the investment into a benefit in the value proposition to the clients, stakeholders, and consumers. So the ROI is publicly accessible, defensible, and verifiable trust. So being able to prove through an external auditor, done independently, will facilitate transparency and give them that competitive advantage in a society that has trust issues with generative AI and AI systems in general. So with that, I'll hand back to Paul.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Good shout. I can see, I think we're actually, going to go over. So I hope people stick around. You've got to forgive the passion and the energy, perhaps, that we're putting into this presentation that drags us over. But, what else you got to do right now, eh? Okay, so what I want to show, what I want to dig into, and something that Chris showed there, internal audit. You might have just caught it. For those of you that caught it, you might have acknowledged it. In internal audit, it covered Article 17 in the EU AI Act. And say after me, what is Article 17? QMS, Quality Management System, right? And Quality Management System is the foundation for complying with the EU AI Act. Yeah, sure, there's a ton of other stuff you have to do, but if you haven't got a decent QMS in place, you're going to struggle. So, you want to be looking for those controls and those audit criteria that's going to get you over the line with the QMS. I'm going to very briefly just show you the rest of the interface here. Now, JD, we've got some keyword searches that we fancied doing. Where did we want to start? Did you get
let's start with intellectual property.
Okay, intellectual property. Second. Sorry, that was just the connection up to my second screen. I'm going to use, in fact, I think I'm going to use find control match, because find control match takes us, rather than to the actual language in the controls, it focuses on the intent of the controls. So it's going to be able to show us, I think, a lot more under intellectual property. Let's give that a go. Okay, so yeah, as you see, it kind of pulls all the relevant, intent around intellectual property from all the different pillars and from all the different controls. So if I now click on this one, the 95%er, oh my word, it takes me right there, right? I mean, like magic. That's a great way to kind of track what you're working on. You're thinking, okay, now how do I protect? How do I work on intellectual property within the RISE framework? Bingo. What else we got, JD? What other?
How about a pretty broad one? How about reporting?
Reporting. Okay, so I'm going to use this function then, just so you can see how this works. So search. I'm going to use search framework this time. Yeah, let's give it a go. All right. Sorry, let me do that again. Reporting. Search. Okay, yeah, there you go. So now you've got reporting right. It's come up quite a bit, hasn't it? And as you can see, I mean, what's interesting is that it comes up so consistently across all these controls. I mean, we're going right from incident management to internal audit to what else we got? I mean, it's just pretty much the whole gamut of the entire process. So reporting is, it's in there for compromise detection, for threat intelligence, even for executive leadership. So all of these areas are critical for reporting. And I can click on one of these and just kind of dive straight into that control. What I also want to highlight is up here, you've got the Explorer tool. So here, this kind of just takes you round and shows you what's going on and how you can use the framework itself. So that's pretty cool. There's also other ways to explore the framework. You can use the Visual Explorer, or you can use the framework overlap. And one of the things that I just want to kind of flag before we finish is that there's some future iterations already planned for the next kind of few months. Listen up. If you do something similar to what we're talking about here, either as a technical implementer, as a lead auditor, whatever it might be, a GRC platform, Arise Partners, capital P, will be launched as we build an ecosystem of trusted partners who can deliver individual controls or broader focus areas such as policy writing. And these partners will be built right into the framework. We're also going to be releasing the ETSI European standard for securing artificial intelligence, baseline cyber security requirements for AI models. And as a proud For Humanity licensee, we will also be integrating For Humanity's upcoming EU AI Act certification schemes. There are 2 of those. And the multi-agentic certification schemes. There are 2 of those. So provider and deployer. So there's going to be a lot more content coming down the pipe. So if you want to be a technical implementation partner or similar, then there's a QR code at the end. Give us a shout and we'll get into that conversation. Okay, Justin, back to you. Thanks everyone for hanging in there.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, and again, Paul was in that ariseviewer.com website. So again, please feel free to go out there and check that out as you see fit. So basically, we've just walked through the Arise and seen how it actually works, from identifying shadow AI to mapping your assets. We're really about that continuous monitoring, catching the drift in real time, making sure that validation path is available to you, so you understand that it's not just about conforming to all of the standards, but it's also making sure that you have done all of the work that you said you've done, and that proof is available to you. So now I'd like to bring back our guests, because earlier you both framed the problem that we've been sort of talking about with the Rise today. Deb, you talked about diffuse responsibility and how standards are sort of fragmented these days. Devora, you raised a point about the importance of developing process and making sure that process is in place. So let's connect the dots a little bit. Again, Deb, you talked about kind of standards being fragmented. We just saw how Arise maps those controls across multiple frameworks, including NIST and ISO, the EU AI Act, basically, in one unified model. How do you think Arise is going to help founders and investors with this type, knowing that this type of functionality is available in the framework?
Well, so that was awesome, Paul and Chris. Thanks so much for taking us through that. It's just, I love when people come together and they simplify complexity. And so this just brings everyone on the same page. It takes away, because it really is overwhelming. I think most people's brains go Control Alt Delete, frankly. And I love that there's the intent. So it's not just about checkboxes. People understand, so it makes it more alive. Because if you can understand it, then you can, when you're navigating, for instance, instances of ethical choice, then it's easier to get your head around it and then to go to the different aspects and make sure everything's covered off. Everyone's on the same page. I love anything that removes complexity. Also, just there's so many triggers, so many things that popped off in my head. A lot of people, I don't think, do proper vetting. I don't think they know the questions to ask. So this actually brings that up. People have FOMO. So Paul mentioned companies that are deploying AEDTs, the automated employment decision tools. Oftentimes, without having vetted them, they don't understand the toxicity in these tools. There's reference to For Humanity, who have just come out with the most phenomenal audit criteria, which I know that Assess is going to tackle as well. But beyond FOMO, I also talk about FOFO, which is fear of finding out. So ladies and gentlemen, you now have no reason and no excuse. You've got the whole roadmap and the whole it's like a treasure hunt, right? But anyway, so this is awesome. Guys, thank you so much for doing this. It's, yeah.
No problem. And you've given us FOFO. So that's super awesome. I'm definitely going to be using that in my discussions moving forward. So thanks, Deb. So Devora, we talked earlier about what boards should be asking management around embedded AI risk, and we saw that those Arise brings controls for inventory, continuous monitoring, that independent audit. How can framework like Arise help to give boards more visibility and accountability in the structure they've been missing?
That's a great question. It was a great presentation on Arise. So one point that Deb pointed out was that folks it's not always FOFO, fear of finding out. It's like, where do we start? There's so many things. We're overwhelmed. We're a small company. We don't have time. We don't have money. And quite frankly, not knowing where to start is often the biggest issue. So the ARISE framework and the other capabilities that are being built onto it will enable boards and the companies that they govern to understand all of the different points that they need to consider with a shared point of communication and a shared language in a non-overwhelming way. They can simply do a few keyword searches to start, so it's not as though they have to do every single thing all at once. But once they understand what needs to be done, then it also gives them that framework, that system for being able to communicate together to do it. Now, I know we've talked about the EUAI Act, and regulations are important, but also there's reputational risk. So even if folks are kind of hoping no one's going to notice, which I don't think is a viable strategy, just saying, even if people feel that way, the reputational risk is huge. And so the ARISE framework also enabled boards and their companies to understand what they would need to tackle first from a functional aspect so they can maintain the reputation of giving great products and services to their customers.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that. And Deb, anything to add to Devorah's comments there?
Yeah, so I love the accountability piece. I mean, investors aren't held accountable, so then, but when you link it to reputation, so the fact of the matter is that in the future, it's not data that will be the moat, it's trust that will be the moat. And having transparency on that for consumers and for businesses, for anyone procuring, is really important. And the faster that we can audit and bring transparency to these tools, the faster we'll remove anxiety, and the kind of this anxiety of you don't quite understand what's in this black box. There are no more excuses. There are no more reasons. The tools and the solutions exist. Let's crack on. More that we can't wait for the law to get there. If we want to wield these powerful tools, we need to demonstrate that we have that responsibility.
Sure. Well, great. Thank you both for your insights today. That's some very valuable things you've shared with us. Really appreciate you helping frame the problem and helping us tie it back to ARISE and what ARISE can actually deliver for you. So we're sticking around for the Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and open that up to all of the panel now. Yeah, I think we've obviously gone a little over our time today. So, but I still think there's some questions here. Paul, Chris, any, based on what Deb and Devorah were talking about, any comments or any sort of insight you want to add to that conversation?
Chris, after you.
Yeah, I think both Deb and Devorah addressed a lot of the key and critical areas that are gaps within organizations. I think transparency, accountability, all of the things that are still there today within organizations that are trying to deploy or are deploying AI systems, but haven't really moved or advanced their the GRC capabilities to cope or keep up with the technology. Yeah, so it's fantastic to get both of their perspectives.
Yeah, one add-on for me, Deb mentioned FOFO, fear of finding out. And I remember almost a year ago, we were having a conversation with a cybersecurity professional in New York, and we were talking about delivering IBM cybersecurity assessments with them. And one of the kind of the sticking blocks that we found in doing these assessments was that you can do a 150 question assessment on cybersecurity, and then when you present the CISO with the answers, they just kind of look away and they're kind of like, I didn't want to know that. Because as soon as they know something like that, then they have to deal with it, right? And that's not, as Devorah said, that's not a strategy. Ignoring it, avoiding it, pretending that it's not there is not a strategy. Just because you didn't know, that's not going to stand up against a regulator or a competitor in the EUA Act. So now's the time to kind of really put your money where your mouth is and decide, okay, we can validate and we can prove that we're better than the rest, and this is how you do it. So that's my.
And can I just quickly add? Yeah, can I just quickly add to your comment, Paul? So I think fear of finding out, right? I mean, you got to balance that out with the potential material impact of adverse outcomes. So you either find out early, well, try and preempt what could happen, find out what you don't know before it happens, or you find out what it happens and it's too late. For example, organizations deploying agentic, right? I mean, there are lots of threats that go with agentic. The best thing to do is do due diligence, put in the safeguards controls, but you got to do that with a deep understanding of what you're dealing with, right? And the potential downside risk of all of that, and then put in your controls. And the RISE helps you do all of that.
Awesome. Well, I know we are definitely at time, so go ahead and wrap this up. As Deb had mentioned before, AI is a responsibility, not just a tool. The ARISE framework gives you that map to navigate that responsibility. We'll send out this recording and links to the ARISE platform, again, ariseframework.com. Paul, did you want to say kind of a final word here?
Oh, I've got lots of final words. No, I'm not going to go deep. All I'm going to say is, look, we looked at part of ARISE today. We dipped into 3 pillars. There is so much content that we'd like to walk you through that is specific to your business. We've provided a teaser of what secure and responsible technology looks like. So we want to walk you through the entire framework, and we want to talk to partners who want to be a part of this framework. So scan the QR code, vote at Eurovision. No, hold on, rewind. Scan the QR code, go into the form, and put your name down and send it in. And I look forward to having a quick 15, 20-minute conversation with you, or maybe with Chris, or one of my other fantastic colleagues from the US, so that we can have a good conversation together. I think really my final word is, let's now move beyond this compliance theatre, which I think has really kind of defined 2025, and let's build us together in 2026. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Paul, for that last word. On behalf of Assessed Intelligence and everybody here, we thank you for joining us today. Really do appreciate our guests for joining us as well. Deb and Devorah, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care, everybody.